Fear Zone, your channel of haunted stories. Welcome to our channel, and let's go to another real horror story. And this happened to Mr. Leandro, and it was in the year 1993, when he was 37 years old. Well, I will not speak the name of the city, to protect the church where this case happened, but what I can tell you here is that this city is in the interior of the state of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. And today I will speak what I spent with this creature, which was certainly a werewolf, but it all started like this. I lived on the street of the square of my neighborhood, which also had a Catholic church there, but so far so normal. But it happened that in a certain early morning, when I would sleep, and it was very cold at that time, I went to get a blanket in the backyard of my house, but I passed in front of the gate, and I saw a strange thing on the street, for there was a walker hiding behind the cars that were parked on the street of the square. I thought that scene was strange, and I kept looking all around, to see from whom the beggar was hiding, and when I looked right at one of the trees in the square, I saw something looking at the beggar. At first I even thought it was another resident of the street, but it turns out that what was hiding behind the tree, I saw that it was an animal similar to a dog, but very large, and the eyes of that creature shone a lot, as if it were lights, and I was very afraid to see that strange animal, and I realized that the intention of that beast was to catch that street dweller. And seeing that the beast started to come towards the walker, I ended up opening the gate of my house. I called the beggar, making a gesture with my hands. I started to call him, for him to hide in my house. But it happened that at that time, I don't know how, but that huge creature heard calling the street dweller, and he hid behind the cars in the square, and I didn't see him anymore. But when I realized, that creature appeared behind a car near my house, but to my fright, is that this beast came out from behind the vehicle, but he was standing like a man and looked at me, and I was standing there at the gate. At that moment the street beggar came running up to my gate, and he went inside my residence, but at that same moment, that creature that to me was a werewolf, came running after the beggar, to try to catch him, but as I managed to close the gate quickly, and saved the man, at that, I heard this creature banging on my gate, but then he stopped with the noises at my gate. But to my surprise, when I looked up, I saw this creature jumping over the wall of my house. At this moment I was terrified, and with a fright, me and the walker, we ran through the iron gate of the corridor of my house, but it turns out that the werewolf managed to run after us. I don't know how, because when I went to close this small gate, which was in the corridor of my house, the beast managed to get his arm through the gate, and so I couldn't close the gate. But in this moment of danger, I started to force the gate from the inside, and the werewolf was forcing it from the outside, in order to get in. But to my amazement, and quickly in this moment of terror, the walker grabbed a brick block that was in my backyard, and started to hit the werewolf's arm, which was preventing us from closing the backyard gate. In all that desperation, the beggar gave several blows to the werewolf's arm. This creature roared in pain, and soon he took his arm from inside the gate, and then this werewolf began to run away roaring loudly inside my house. It was a terrifying moment, those cries of the creature, that even shook my house. At that time, the neighbor's dog started barking nonstop, and when I looked at the wall of the house, I saw the creature already jumping to the street, and was certainly fleeing in pain. But of course I didn't trust that beast. I was smart and attentive at that moment. Even though I was scared to death, I managed to close the gate to the backyard corridor of the house, to make it difficult for that werewolf to enter. At this, my wife woke up with the noises. I ended up explaining everything to her, what had happened, and why the werewolf was there inside our house. And also, I let this homeless man spend this night in my residence, because what we experienced that early that morning, I would not let him back to the street at that time, because for sure, that werewolf would end up with him on the street. However, we stayed there at home until dawn, but we were scared of that creature, and I was there looking out the window of the house to the street to see if that creature was still around. What surprised me is that I saw that werewolf still hiding in a dark place near the church of the square, and he was looking in the direction of my house. After some time, this werewolf ended up disappearing from that place, but we stayed there at home until dawn, but always alert with that creature. As soon as dawn broke, the beggar wanted to return to the street again, and this, I took advantage and asked the walker, "Where did that werewolf?" This guy ended up telling me that I would not believe who turned this beast, and the homeless man ended up telling me and warning me that I would Sunday in Mass, then I would know who turned this creature. Well, I was intrigued by what the beggar said, that if I went to Mass on Sunday, I would know who turned this creature. After this conversation, this walker went away. Anyway, but arriving on Sunday, I arrived at the church there in the square, and was in the service looking at people, to see if I saw someone, that I could be that werewolf, but nothing was happening. I even looked at all the people of the place, and ficavo thinking about what the walker told me, that he knew who turned this creature, but after a while, the priest began to make the service supper. When he distributed the bread and wine to the people in line, I got in line too, and when the priest gave me a piece of bread, I noticed that one of his arms was bandaged under his cassock, and at this time, the priest kind of looked at me with scared eyes. I was also embarrassed, and of course for me the priest was the suspect of being the werewolf. At this time, then I lowered my head and went back to the church bench. Then I stood there looking at the priest and also at his arm, and started to notice that it wasn't just a simple band that was on his arm. I noticed that he moved his arms with great difficulty and seemed to be very hurt. The priest also started to look at me, gave a strange and suspicious look. Then, what the walker told me could be true, that in the Mass, I would know who was that turned this werewolf. And besides all this, to make me more sure that it was the priest who turned werewolf, is that he was new in this church, where he replaced the old priest almost 2 months ago. After the service, I went back to my house. I kept looking in the direction of the church that night to try to see something more strange. I noticed that sometimes this priest would look in the direction of my house through the window of the parish, so I became more suspicious of him and thought to myself that any day this creature could be watching me and waiting for a moment of distraction from me to try to invade my house again. But a few days later, I saw the wanderer that ran away from the werewolf in the morning, and he was talking to the priest, and it didn't seem to be a friendly conversation between the two, because one was pointing his finger at the other, and the wanderer was cursing the priest, and at that moment, after that discussion between the two, I saw this street dweller walking in the square. I went to find out what he was talking about with the priest, and the homeless man told me that he knew that it was the priest who turned the werewolf, and that even some people in the neighborhood knew his secret, and that there were some people who were waiting for him to come back and get the werewolf. And the beggar also told me that he wouldn't sleep in this square anymore, because he didn't want to meet this creature again. So, I asked the street dweller if he knew anything more about this beast, or if he had seen this creature other times at dawn, and what the street dweller told me was that once in a neighboring city, he had a walking partner who walked with him, and his partner was even bitten by such a creature while they were walking through the streets at dawn, but they managed to escape from the werewolf, and that after some time of this attack, his partner started to get strange, and the dogs from the city streets always tried to attack him, and with this, after some time, he saw his partner turning into this creature, and after this day, he never met this street dweller again. But after this whole conversation with this homeless man, I was kind of hanging around and watching the neighborhood church to see if I saw any clues of the creature. But one day, I saw the priest leaving at night with a car, and then I watched well, and soon after he returned to the church very early in the morning. I saw that he held some iron chains in his hands, but the creature I saw no more. As time went by, and after a few months, this priest ended up leaving the neighborhood parish and disappeared from the city, and no one has heard from him since. And with this problem, the parish was some weeks without any priest to make mass in the neighborhood, but over time, everything was returning to normal, because soon another priest arrived in this parish, and the homeless people who had disappeared from the square began to return little by little there. But after this whole story, that I lived the experience with a werewolf, I don't know if that priest was really the one who turned this creature, but that I was attacked by a werewolf. This happened, and I give a warning to all of you: be very careful when you walk around at dawn, because you can see a creature like that in front of you, even in an urbanized neighborhood. Well, folks, that was my real horror story, and if you like the story, give a like and subscribe to our channel. Fear Zone, your channel of haunted stories. And now then, let's go to today's story. Hello everybody, and today I am going to tell you what happened to me in the year 1997 when I was working in the region of the city of Piracicaba, which is in Brazil, and at that time I was 39 years old. And to start my horror story, I never thought in all my life that I would go through a situation like this, of meeting the werewolf at my worst moment. And to start my story, at that time many years ago, I worked in a sugar mill during the night hours, and this company was inside a large sugarcane field. I had an old car, which I used to go to work. One Friday, when I was working at the mill, a friend invited me to a party after work, and I accepted the invitation. So as soon as our work hours were over, my friend and I got in the car and drove to the party. However, the roads through the sugarcane fields were dirt and dark, and to my bad luck my car started giving problems and stopped on the dirt road. We waited for someone to pass by to help us, but after an hour, no one drove by on the road. With that, we started to fix the car, and at this moment, my friend and I saw something strange come out of the woods running, and that shape entered the middle of the sugarcane field. My colleague kept asking me what animal it was, because we got a big scare because of the size of that animal. We thought it might be a dangerous animal, so we decided to get inside the car to see what that animal was, or if it was still around. We kept an eye on the bushes and on the reed fields, but we didn't see anything else. But even so, we were pretty scared, however, seeing that that animal didn't appear anymore, so we got out of the car and tried to fix the car, and at that time, it was already past 1 o'clock in the morning, while we spent our time on that road, still scared of that animal that had crossed the street. But looking closer we saw that there was a house up ahead, so we pushed the car to the next house to ask for help, but we noticed that when we got closer, the lights in the house went out. We found this strange, and started to look inside this house to see what was happening, and we got a fright, because we saw a black figure circling the fence of that house. It was for sure that animal that we saw crossing the dirt road, and that entered the sugarcane field. And looking at that beast, I realized that it was a creature totally different from anything I had ever seen. It looked like a monkey, and like a dog too. It was an amazing thing to see, because it was bigger than a large dog. But soon, that creature stopped and started sniffing the air, and he started looking in the direction of my car, and for sure he realized our presence there, because that animal stood up, and stood on 2 legs, as if it were a person, and for us this creature was a werewolf, because he had red and lit eyes. Finally, this creature started to come walking towards us, and then he started to bang on our car window, and also this werewolf was trying to open the car door. In that moment of terror, we stayed there with a lot of fear, but I risked myself, and I managed to start the car a little, and began to honk the car horn, and it worked, because the werewolf was frightened with the noises, and this creature was on 4 legs and ran to the bushes near the house. At the time my friend and I were watching him, and that beast ducked into the woods hiding, but the eyes of that monster was so bright and lit that we could see when it was looking at the car. But the strange thing is that the werewolf stayed there in the woods for almost an hour, and it didn't want to leave the house, and we wondered what the werewolf wanted. But after some time, the werewolf disappeared from the place, and we didn't see it again. Even so, we decided to wait until dawn to try to fix the car, because at that time there were no cars passing by to help us, and it was a totally deserted and dark place. However, we were still very scared, but the hours went by, and when it got close to 4 o'clock in the morning, suddenly we started to hear the barking of dogs in the distance, and we got even more scared, and before long, to our surprise, we saw that werewolf again near the fence behind that house, where we were standing there in front. But this werewolf this time, he came into the backyard of the residence, and stood on only 2 legs, and he started sniffing the window. I think that was to sniff if there was someone who was there inside the house. But the strange thing is that this creature went to the front door of the residence that was already open, and he came inside the house. At that moment I thought, if there is anyone inside this house, they will be killed by this creature, and we stayed there without knowing what to do, but very worried, because there could be a family inside this residence. At this time of danger, my friend said, "There's no way, let's get a piece of wood on the fence and fight with this creature." So, when we got out of the car and grabbed some pieces of wood from the fence, but entered the backyard of the house, we heard some moaning noises, and it sounded like someone was rolling on the ground inside the house, but then we didn't hear any more noises in there. I thought it was strange that no one turned on the light or screamed. As nothing was happening, we got back into the car and kept watching to see what that werewolf was going to do, but time went by and everything was quiet around, and soon the day began to dawn and the sun came up, and so something happened. For me and the colleague, we saw an old man looking at us through the window of the house, and then he disappeared. We decided to ask the old man for some help. We called him, but the old man didn't come out to answer us, and it seemed that he was afraid of us. Well, a car passed by on the road, and so this driver stopped to help us. We tied a rope to both cars, and the driver managed to get us out of that deserted place, and I saw that the old man was hiding watching us, but we managed to get out of this place. Anyway, we stopped at a car mechanic, and I managed to solve the problem with my vehicle, and then I left for my home. So a few days passed, and for me, that old man of the house had some kind of connection with the werewolf, or maybe he transformed himself into this creature. However, now I know that these creatures exist and are violent. Anyway, with the forests and sugarcane fields that were near the company I worked for, I started to leave my job with the company's own bus, but today I am already retired, and that place where we saw the werewolf is already a small neighborhood, because the city has grown a lot in these last years. But after that night that I saw that creature, my whole concept about the hidden things that can exist in this world changed. And until today, I don't know the relationship that old man of the house had with the werewolf, because I don't know if he was the one who turned the beast, or if he hid and protected that creature in his house. This doubt I have until today. These days I passed in front of the werewolf's house, but found that the old man had left for another town. And you, what do you think about the relationship between the old man and the werewolf? Well, if you liked the story, like it and subscribe to the Fear Zone channel. Until the next horror story.